Welcome to Aging Insight with your host, John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer, and I'm here with John Ross, and we are elder law attorneys based here in your community in the Arklatex. And Aging Insight is a weekly information program for all of the viewers who, they want to pick up a few tidbits and a few facts to help them as they navigate through the aging process and they navigate through legal issues, housing issues, financial issues, and health issues. That's what Aging Insight is here to help.
That's right. And that's also what we do as elder law attorneys, is we try to address these all of these different issues by picking little pieces of the law from different areas. Maybe a little bit about wills and trusts, or a little bit about guardianships or Medicare, veterans benefits, all different kinds of things. Because, we try to service a particular group of people as opposed to a particular type of law. And that means sometimes we got to look all different kinds of laws out there. And one of the topics that gets brought up quite a bit in meetings that we have with clients are those little loved ones out there, the grandkids and the great grandkids. A lot of times people have really good relationships with these grandkids. In fact, based on the most recent studies, there are 4.9, so almost 5 million kids who are living with a grandparent. That's about 7% of all of the kids out there. So there's a lot of grandparent caregivers, and that number has been steadily going up every year. So we see a lot of grandparents who are full-time caregivers, and then of course you've also got a lot of grandparents that are part-time caregivers.
That's right.
Even in my own household, I've got some grandparents that pick up their grandkids from school because their son is working. So there's lots of grandparents out there that are kicking in a little helping hand, maybe on a part-time basis or a full-time basis. Yeah. But the legal relationship between a grandparent and a grandchild is a little different out there than what many people even think it is.
Well, that's right. We think of our family ties that they're very strong, and so we feel very emotionally strong about those ties, and we assume that the law protects those emotional ties that we have and those familial bonds that we have between grandparents and grandchildren. The reality is the law is not your best place to get those protections. And so let me tell you how this most frequently comes up. We're heading into the holidays again, and so a lot of times, for some grandparents, this may be a big time of year to see those grandchildren. And, sometimes parents, that middle generation, they're just not doing their job very well. And, maybe they have substance abuse problems, alcohol, pills, that type of thing. Maybe they have, chronic joblessness, or, maybe they just are not interested in being responsible parents, and they're still acting like teenagers themselves as parents, running around, partying, and not really being the adult and seeing to their own children's needs. Well, grandparents notice these things. And so oftentimes the conversation starts because a grandparent is speaking with me. Maybe it's because they have other elder law concerns, but they thought they'd just bring up that issue with that grandchild. And they ask, well, what can I do? What rights do I have when I talk to my daughter about how she's raising these kids, she gets mad and then she won't let me see them.
Right.
You know, and so we get that response. And so grandma is in my office saying, you know, that's not right. That's my grandchildren. I should be able to see my grandchildren. How do I go about doing this legally? Because I can't get anywhere with my own child to facilitate that relationship.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even the kid themselves, but maybe who they've brought into the family. Maybe it's that spouse that they've married, and your daughter likes you just fine, but her husband doesn't, and so he doesn't want, you know, his kids around you. And so I've had clients that live in the same town with their grandkids, but have not seen them for months or years, and they want to have that relationship. And of course, you know, a lot of these grandparents are, maybe it's just from TV, or maybe they're friends or family or whatever, but they're familiar with the idea of custodial rights,
Of grandparents' rights.
Yeah, they want to
Yes.
know, you know, can I petition a court maybe to get them once a month,
yeah.
or maybe for a week in the summer or something like that. So, you know, and used to, there were some laws on the books.
That's right. You know, used to, we did in fact have some laws that did grant grandparents at least some minimum access rights to grandchildren. And of course, I'm using that whole sentence was in the past tense. And that's because in the year 2000, the U.S. Supreme Court came in on a case and really gutted grandparents' rights as we knew them up till that point. So, you know, why don't we take a break and stick around with this, and I'll tell you about that case and how that impacts your access to your grandchildren if that ever comes up.
All our moments should be cherished. SEMA Hospice provides comfort care when you need it most with compassion, dignity, and respect. Along with Jordan Health Services, SEMA Hospice provides compassionate continuity of care. SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
As things get older, they require more care. This car and I have seen a lot of miles together, but because I take care of her, she runs just like she did in 1955. That's why I chose the Wadley Senior Clinic with an individualized care plan designed just for me and a convenient location off Jefferson Avenue. They have everything to keep me running like new. It's not about the miles, it's about the journey. Let the Wadley Senior Clinic keep you happy, healthy, and cruising down the road of life.
The Oaks Independent are apartments for seniors who love secure peace of mind and consistency in their lives. Included in the price are cable, utilities, meals, weekly housekeeping, daily monitoring, and a medical alert device. All apartments wheelchair accessible, freestanding homes in a great part of town. Live in style, comfort, and accessibility. Live independent. Find us online or call today to schedule a tour. The Oaks Independent.
Hi there, I'm Larry Sims. It's been my privilege for the past several years to be a volunteer board member of Hospice of Texarkana, and there I'm able to represent community members like you. We continually customize our end-of-life care to better meet the needs of our community. As an example, our medical director and nurse practitioner still make visits to homes and facilities. Call today to learn more about the help we can give your family. Hospice of Texarkana, the nonprofit hospice established in 1985 for the community, by the community.
From our first moments to our final days, life's journey should be remembered free of burden and worry. Families should be cherished. SEMA Hospice provides comfort care, dignity, and respect. Learn more about SEMA Hospice at SEMAHospice.com. SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. I'm John Ross here with Lisa Schulmeyer. And today we're talking about issues related to grandparents and grandparents' rights and the legal interaction between grandparents and grandkids. And we're starting the program by talking about visitation and access to the child, because a lot of times, for whatever reason, that grandparent has been denied or or something is preventing them from being able to have a relationship with those grandkids. And a lot of times they would like to petition the court to get those rights. And we mentioned that a lot of the states used to have laws on the books that said that a grandparent could petition a court to get rights to visit a child. And that type of law was on the books in the state of Washington when a woman by the name of Tommy Granville and her husband, Brad Troxel, they were separated, but Brad's parents had a long-standing relationship with the kids after the parents got divorced. Unfortunately, Brad committed suicide, and after his suicide, the mother essentially cut off access to the kids, to Brad's parents. They wouldn't let them see him anymore, and so they sued, and that case managed to finally wind its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And what did the Supreme Court say about grandparents' rights?
Well, John, sadly, what the Supreme Court did was essentially gut any of our state laws that provided for any type of grandparents' rights. You know, in this case, we had the paternal grandparents who, the facts were clear. They did have a close and loving and supportive relationship with their grandchildren. But, you know, after their son died and the children's mother cut off all visits, these grandparents, in order to continue that relationship, they felt it was very important to provide access to the children to the father's side of the family so they would know his side of the family. The mother felt very differently about that. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court essentially said that a parent has an absolute right to determine and decide who their minor children associate with. So the Supreme Court leaned heavily on the parents' autonomy to make the right decisions for their children, their minor children. And so essentially overnight, any grandparents' access laws that were on the books in the state of Texas or Arkansas, even though this was a case that came out of Washington state, grandparents' rights in Texas and Arkansas were just basically wiped clean off the books. So
yeah, so unfortunately, when we get that question in our office about, well, you know, John or Lisa, you know, what can we do to force our kids to give us some quality time with these grandkids, oftentimes the answer is nothing, or at least very little. Now, there's always exceptions.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the law if there weren't some exceptions.
That's right. You know, so for example, if the children are actually living with the grandparent, and maybe they have been there for some length of time, that changes the whole thing.
It does. You know, if your grandchildren have been living in your home for at least 6 months, and here's another little key to keep in mind, the parent cannot be living there. So essentially, if you as the grandparent have become the substitute parent for at least 6 months, because maybe your child dropped the children off with you one day and took off on a party tour, but for whatever reason, if your grandchildren have been with you for 6 months and you've acted like their parent for 6 months, then that's an exception where if their parent swoops back in and wants to take the children out of your home and deny you access, the law does provide an exception in that situation where you can petition the court for grandparents' rights.
Yeah, so keep this 6-month thing in mind, because that can be a real significant deal. You know, I remember a very specific situation where we had grandparents who were caring for their grandchild in their home, and then they were also funneling about $300 a month to their daughter, who was just out flitting about, going from apartment to apartment, job to job. And you know, after a couple of months of this, they kind of got tired of giving that $300 to the daughter. And so they cut her off and said, you know what, we're just not going to pay for you anymore. And of course, the daughter, being not really a very nice person, she pops back up and says, well, fine, then I'm taking my kid back. And she took that kid well before that child had lived there for the 6-month time frame. And so the grandparents were out of luck. You know, in hindsight, they probably should have just kept paying that couple of $100 until they had gotten past that 6 months. So if you're in one of these situations, keep that 6-month time frame in mind, because it can be very important, and it can be the only thing that keeps that access to those grandkids around.
Right. And so there's also another exception, John, and that really has to do with any endangerment to the child or the children. And now the question becomes, what is true endangerment? You know, physical or emotional damage that could be done to the child if they remain in the circumstances with their parent. Sometimes grandparents and parents have different ideas about what constitutes neglect and endangerment to a child. So the courts do make exceptions, even if you haven't had your grandchild for 6 months. For instance, if the parent had attempted suicide or was clearly mentally unstable and there were outward, appearances of that instability, that might be enough to show that if the children are left with that parent, they would be likely to be physically or emotionally endangered. But if you're upset because your child feeds your grandchildren nothing but fast food and is late for school every day, and the children are always wearing clothes that are dirty or 2 sizes too small, that probably doesn't meet the requirement of endangerment. Even though it's clearly bad parenting, it doesn't meet the legal threshold to be endangering to the children such that a court would step in and, give custody to a grandparent.
Yeah, unfortunately, parents have as according to the Supreme Court, they have a constitutional right to be bad parents.
Yeah, they sure do.
Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. They can't endanger the child, and if they have abandoned them to your custody and they've been there for 6 months, then that changes the game. But otherwise, there's not a lot when it comes to being able to force those rights. Now, of course, all of this is related to kind of a negative situation.
Sure.
But there's lots of positive situations out there. Maybe your kids are going to go on vacation for a little while, and you're going to keep the grandkids for a week. Or maybe, like when I was a child, I used to go spend summers with my grandparents. They had a lake house, and we would go water skiing and go to Six Flags and all kinds of stuff. But I would stay there for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But that raises some unique issues as well, and some that you may not have thought about. But of course, you're going to have to stick around after this break to find out the answer. So we'll be right back. Stick around.
With my dad, it was in a hospital setting, and in his situation, he fell into renal failure. He also helped us make the decision to be on hospice. I have to admit, it took a huge weight off our shoulders for him to be willing. That offered us a lot of comfort, along with the hospice company itself, but it gave us closure, and it helped us through the entire process.
SEMA Hospice, comfort and care when it matters most.
As things get older, they require more care. This car and I have seen a lot of miles together, but because I take care of her, she runs just like she did in 1955. That's why I chose the Wadley Senior Clinic, with an individualized care plan designed just for me and a convenient location off Jefferson Avenue. They have everything to keep me running like new. It's not about the miles, it's about the journey. Let the Wadley Senior Clinic keep you happy, healthy, and cruising down the road of life.
Welcome back to Aging Insight. I'm Lisa Scholmeyer here with John Ross. And today we're talking about some of the most, special legacies in the life of our seniors, and that is grandchildren. Grandchildren can be such a blessing and such a worry to our seniors, but so we want on this episode to address a few of those issues. In our prior segment, we talked about those situations where maybe a parent isn't doing the good job, and maybe they're even endangering your grandchildren. Well, we've talked about how grandparents' rights have been really severely limited by the United States Supreme Court. And, my advice on all of that is, honestly, if you really think there's a problem, roll the dice, take it to the courthouse, and see if the judge agrees with you. So, but luckily, most of the relationships between grandparents and grandchildren and are positive, and frankly, a lot of parents lean very heavily on the grandparents to assist, maybe even in daily activities, or if they don't live close together, John, like you were talking about, going and spending some extended time in the summers and traveling with their grandparents. So,
oh yeah, I used to always enjoy going and making that trip to my grandparents' house. They had the lake house, and that was always something I looked forward to. And Lisa, there was always one constant in that trip, and that is the first day I would get there, and I would get out, and I would swim, and I would hang out outside, and by the next day I would have the worst sunburn of the entire summer.
Right, that day one, yes.
And that usually ranged from just being painful redness to one year it was actually blistered, and it was bad. It was bad enough that they had to take me to the doctor. Well, when you're the parent of a child, you can consent to things like medical treatment for them. But when you're the grandparent, you don't have those rights. And so, when my grandparents show up at the doctor or the hospital to get me some treatment, they don't have the ability to consent to that treatment, and therefore the doctors or hospitals will not treat me. Of course, if it's an emergency, they will do everything they can to stabilize my condition. But once that condition is stabilized, if there's other more comfort level type treatments, like the administration of pain medicine or things like that, things that are not life-threatening, that stuff requires medical consent authorization. And so if you're gonna be caring for a grandchild, whether it's after school during the week or for a couple of weeks in the summer, you need to make sure you've got the ability to consent to medical treatment in an emergency for that child.
Yeah, and that consent needs to be in writing. And luckily these days we have the wonderful internet at hand. And I know through Aging Insight, and we have provided temporary medical powers of attorney that is specifically designed for grandparents who are caring for grandchildren. And it's a form that the parent fills out and signs that permits their grandparent, their parent, to obtain medical treatment for the grandchild. And that paper needs to be on hand whenever the grandparent has the care and custody of that grandchild, because accidents happen, running down the driveway, falling, busting the chin open. We need some stitches. Mom's at a 12-hour shift at the hospital. So, and we need to jump in and go get those that medical treatment. So you need to have it on hand. It's also a good idea to have a copy, if the parents have medical insurance on the child, that you have a copy of the front and the back of a medical insurance card that covers that child.
And also a lot of times, especially if the parents are young, then that means that their parents, you're still relatively young. A lot of times the kids may want their parents to be the guardian of their child in the event that the child dies. And so another thing in this, another conversation to have with that child is, if you're going to be keeping the child, say, for that summer or for a couple of weeks or whatever, what happens if the parent dies? Where does that child need to go, and do you have the right paperwork? All parents should have executed something called a declaration of guardian. This is a particular document that says who's going to be in charge of that child in the event that the parent dies. And if it's the grandparent, great, then the grandparent needs a copy of that while the child is in their possession. And if it's not the grandparent, it would be a good idea if that grandparent knew who the designated guardian is going to be, so they know who to call. And that can be kind of a tough conversation, but this is a tough situation, and it's a whole lot easier to have that conversation before the crisis than it is to have it in the middle of the crisis.
Well, and the bottom line, John, is if a parent fails to fill out or complete a declaration of guardian for their minor child, if that parent dies, then the person who decides where that grandchild is going to be is sitting at the courthouse. And he or she doesn't know anything about the family circumstances or the family dynamics. So I'm always, and Aging Insight is always a big proponent of putting, the tools in your hands to make those type of decisions and not leave it to, people.
Yeah, somebody in a black robe down at the courthouse.
I mean, they try to do their best, but it's you always want to make those decisions for yourself.
Absolutely. Well, certainly grandparents' rights is a complicated area, and so you may have additional questions, and if you do, you can always call us during our live radio show, which is every Saturday at noon on 107.1. You can call in and ask whatever questions you have, and you can always catch past episodes of this show and the radio show on our website, aginginsight.com, and also on the KLFI TV website. So feel free to check us out there. And of course, stick with us until next week, where we'll have a brand new episode for you. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Aging Insight program with John Ross and Lisa Scholmeyer. This program is made possible by